And here we go, and we will try to update you on the latest when it comes to that Mountain West and Pac-12 fight, so to speak, on who keeps whom and who maybe changes their mind, and also now even a lawsuit involved with the Pac-12 not happy because of an agreement apparently the conferences have when it comes to when they decided to have their scheduling kind of meshed together. Craig Smoak to my right, Paul Catalina. In the studio today, Garrett Ross, Jack McKenzie, Emery Winter also is here. So here's the latest on what is going on. And this from Ross Dellinger. When it comes to the Pac-12 and also the Mountain West, Pac-12 has filed a suit against the Mountain West in federal court over millions in penalty fees that the Mountain West believes it is owed per documents obtained by Yahoo Sports. The Mountain West Conference requested Pac-12 pay $43 million in fees for acquiring the four members. That was the first part of what we'll get to, what is the next or possibly last part.
Well, it's such a weird situation that now you've got, yesterday was this team is staying, this team is leaving, and then Utah State leaves, and that throws a lot of things into question for the other teams in the conference. Air Force said they were going to stay, but now maybe they won't if the thing falls apart. And clearly the Pac-12 is trying to make the Mountain West dissolve so that they don't have to pay those fees, which is kind of the ESPN Texas OU plan, but now actually put into action where this is just as likely to happen as is it not likely to happen right now.
Yeah, so a really interesting day yesterday with just all the moving parts and everything that seemed to finally sort of settle in that got kicked back up again when UNLV decided, they weren't going to necessarily agree to stick where they were, and they were open to having more conversations and perhaps even heading to the Pac. And so that is a Jenga piece that gets pulled that you thought otherwise was in order. And now the whole structure is still kind of shaky no matter what angle you're looking at it from. You've got two conferences who both need one more team at this point and are fighting over exactly how that's going to go down. Yeah, it's all just very, very interesting stuff. You got Air Force who's hanging in the balance now because they could have an option to go and join the American. And now that you've had Utah State leave, that's led to UNLV and Air Force now saying, like, wait a second. So, you thought that – first of all, kudos to the American for just getting out there and being like, all right, we're shutting the door. We're done. Nobody's moving. We're all here together. You can stop looking at us and focusing on us. The American just kind of moves – off stage, right? And so now it's just this battle brewing between the Pac and the Mountain West, and the Mountain West thought that they had got all of their cards in order, and then obviously that changed during the course of just this show yesterday. So, yeah, now they'll take it to court where the Pac-12 has been quite a lot lately, and they've had some successes there, but this basically boils down to that they should not be required to have to pay a bunch of money in a poaching penalty. So just to make that clear for everybody, this is not arguing over the exit fee. This is that went above and beyond, and that having more of this money being asked to be paid is an antitrust violation. So they're not saying that there shouldn't be an exit fee. It's just that there was that add-on to this, the poaching penalty that they are saying is not right or whatever, that they're arguing is as Nicole Auerbach said, unlawful horizontal restraint on competition. So it's very interesting. I don't know how this goes down, but the Pac has gone from pacifist to maybe a little dirty in this whole thing, depending on which way you want to look at it. And what did they know at the time they agreed to that original scheduling agreement? What did they foresee happening? And are they being a little dastardly and finding a way to turn this around and perhaps get out of paying that money and killing off a conference and therefore not having to pay this money? It's a very interesting chess match going on right now as these two try to duke it out and survive.
$17 million would be the exit fee per school. And then on top of that, they're asking for 10 more per school that is leaving. When Utah State late last night decided to go to the big Pac-12, then all of a sudden UNLV and Air Force, who seem to be tied at the hip in many ways, they said, well, wait a minute. We did this committed thinking we would have the full conference.
Yeah, and then Utah
and now
State.
they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, Utah State originally you thought you had your 8. You had the 8 that you needed to be the Mountain West. And then when Utah State changed their mind, that basically opened up the whole thing to where then, UNLV, Air Force are like, well, wait a second. If they're not a part of the agreement, that wasn't what we originally agreed to. So that changes everything, and now everything's back open, and therefore now potentially having, if you're UNLV, certainly a conversation with the Pac-12, who needs one more team, and also if you're Air Force, perhaps looking at the Pac-12, but also looking at the American, where you could go and join Army and Navy and have all 3 of the service academies together. So both of those teams have options. That leaves the Mountain West in a lurch, feeling like you kind of had this all settled yesterday, but now you clearly don't, and now you might be in even bigger trouble if a couple of schools leave, because then you're suddenly down, to what would it be, like 6 schools, and then you've got a couple more, and so on and so forth. And so
you gotta have what, 8?
You gotta have 8, and they
they
both are one short right now.
Yeah.
So they're both looking for one, and this is all about just the exorbitant poaching penalty that was tacked on to the regular exit fees and was a part of that scheduling agreement. So I don't know what was talked about when these two made that scheduling agreement. You look at some Pac-12 fans and they'll say, well, this was unconstitutional or unlawful to begin with. So the Pac knew what they were doing and knew this wouldn't be enforceable and that they could turn around and sue. And then there's others who believe that the Pac-12 is, trying to squirrel their way out of this and get their cake and eat it too. And I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. So I'm not sure where this goes except for to the courtroom, and that will be very interesting to see how that works out. But, it's a bit of a fight now brewing between these two, and the rest of the world just kind of watching along.
Some of you are asking in the chat room about, did Utah State leave? Yes.
Yes.
Hopefully you're listening to what we're trying to tell you, because even Dennis Dodd, Brett McMurphy, and others wrote a story about how chaotic the day was. And it got more chaotic last night. Utah State decided to leave, which then UNLV and Air Force decided, wait a minute, we decided to stick to the Mountain West because we thought it would be a full 8-team conference, which now, as we just said, was 7. And then there's the possibility Hawaii, which is a football-only team, conference program, if they were to go and change to the Pac-12, the Pac-12 would have 8, the Mountain West would have 6. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot to get to. Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ, will join us today at 3:30 on the latest when it comes to realignment.
In that lawsuit, the Pac-12 against the Mountain West, because it's the Pac-12 suing the Mountain West, arguing that those poaching fees are, what's the right term for that? Not unlawful or...
They're exorbitant.
Exorbitant,
Yeah.
which is what the basis of the lawsuit is. So basically the Pac's trying to get their teams that they wanted from the Mountain West and pay the exit fee, but not have to pay the tacked-on exorbitant poaching fees.
Unlawful, unenforceable, and violation of antitrust law.
So the PAC is saying, the exit fee is one thing, but that poaching fee that you added on when we're agreeing to this scheduling alliance, that's boo-boo. We're not going to do that, and we're going to take you to court over that. So what was seen in that lawsuit by the Pac-12 was that they officially recognized that Utah State is now a member of the Pac-12. So, again, what that means is the Mountain West 8 that had agreed to stay together, one of them backed out, Utah State. So now everybody, like an Air Force or UNLV, is saying, well, this isn't what we agreed to yesterday, so we're no longer 100% all in, and we're weighing our options, which leaves the Mountain West in a pickle because now they're not at 8, and they could be at less than 7, depending on how this goes, whereas the Pac has Utah State, so now they have 7. They need one more to get to 8, which could be UNLV, could be Air Force.
Yeah, if the Mountain West loses both those teams, they're
pretty much toast, but they're also relying on those penalty fees, and so that's why they want that money, why they originally put that in the agreement. And
to
so
lure other teams to get to
it's
the
that tug of war. But yes,
All right.
Utah State is officially acknowledged in this lawsuit as a member of the Pac-12, and that's why that Jenga piece got pulled, and now the thing is swaying
and they're
all
a part
over
of the
again.
lawsuit. They've already been added to the lawsuit, too,
Yeah.
suing the conference they were in less than 24 hours ago. Now, this is not something, Garrett, that I sent to you, but Dan Wolken, USA Today, made this comment from a source involved in conference, the clout of conferences around the country. But the plan is going to be limited. Another reality facing the Pac-12. Memphis, one consultant told USA Today Sports, is not valued by TV rights holders significantly more than, let's say, Utah State. And, of course, Memphis has decided to stay in the AAC like the others did yesterday. Oregon State, and this is the one that Oregon State and Washington State, the two original Pac-12 leftovers who decided to bring the conference back, aren't valued much more than Memphis. So you have this pot where everybody seems to be about the same. And, of course, what everyone would also like is the possibility to be able to compete for a championship, have enough schools to be a part of the college football playoff, and be looked at as among the four conferences. Big Ten, that's not going to happen. SEC's not going to happen. And no matter what anyone may think, it's not any better, or no, it's no close to being better than the ACC and or the Big 12. As of now, and it doesn't seem like that will change no matter what happens or who is added, even with win-loss records or whatever in the future.
Yeah, that's just not reality. I saw a random, I don't know if it was a Wazoo or Oregon State or maybe a new Pac-12 fan that was trying to say because they are probably going to add Gonzaga, which is not like Gonzaga came out in full force last night denying Brett McMurphy's report. Brett McMurphy, who we know very well, friend of the show, is sticking by his report. So he, that looks like it's probably going to happen, but everybody's kind of like, no, that's not. So if you were to assume that they're in the Pac-12, I've seen Pac-12 fans try to say that it'd be like a better basketball conference than the Big 12. You're not dealing with people that are living in reality if they're saying things like that. You're just I understand cope, but it's just not even close. I mean, look at the TV dollars. Like, that's all you have to look at is the TV dollars. Theirs is going to be triple in the Big 12 and certainly the ACC than whatever the Pac might get, which they don't even know what they might get yet. So this is not going to be a Power 5 again. It's just not. It's just not. And so I don't know what that means as far as playoff access and things like that, but there were two very funny comments I saw, and it sucks to be on the receiving end of this, but it's part of the deal. There was an Oregon State fan who was responding to this graphic that was put together by Beaver Swag, I guess a big Oregon State fan, and put together this graphic that had the Pac-7, and it had the logos of the 7. And this account, Beaver Sheets, responds to this Pac-7 logo, a gun would be faster. So I thought that was funny because not everybody is like just drinking the Kool-Aid and like the Pac is back and this is great. There's a lot of Oregon State fans and Washington State fans are like, this is not what we were hoping for with all this war chest money and all these studios and things like that. It wasn't to basically recreate a hybrid Pac Mountain West type of monster. And Cyclone Larry, who you guys know very well, also had a tweet last night when a lot of this was going on that said, just bleeping merge, you idiots, at the Pac-12 and Mountain West.
I saw that, yeah.
But obviously, one's wanting to survive and the other one looking to get killed off. So
how surprising. Conferences trying to kill off others.
It's a lot of palace intrigue, obviously, going on here between the conferences, and this is a mess. I think the funniest thing to me is that the Pac-12 does think that, like, by doing this, that they can just come in and say that they are something now. I'll liken it to giving yourself a nickname. Like if Emory came in tomorrow and was like, no, you don't call me Emory, you call me Bronco, we'd be like, shut up, we're not calling you Bronco. Like that's not going to happen. They can't just make the Pac-12 again. They're like, hey, we're the same. You know what's the same? Utah State and USC. Same thing.
Yeah.
Not the same thing.
I think that's just cope, and that could always be on the other side of the anonymity of social media. Like somebody just doesn't know any better, but I've seen a lot of trying to rationalize and pretend like this is the level of what it was, and it's just not even anywhere close.
Let's go back to what Dan Watkins said. This is not about wins and losses, whether Memphis beat Florida State or somebody else beat, like his Navy just beat Memphis. This is all to generate television dollars, no different than what happened with Texas OU and what happened with the Big 12 or Pac-12 schools going to the Big 10 or Pac-12 schools going to the, obviously, Big 12, and then schools going to the ACC. This is not about who you think might be better in football here and there. And I just saw the comment in a second ago from, who was it? D'Angelo. If the Pac had added Memphis, Tulane, USF, and UTSA, they would be better than the Big 12.
No, they wouldn't.
I have respect for every one of those programs. We've had guests on from each of those programs, but no, they wouldn't. And that is your opinion. You can have it, but no, they wouldn't. If that was the case, those schools would be apart. of the Big 12 when they were making some of the moves. And in some cases, some of them just weren't ready when that opportunity came. And I'm looking at Memphis. Now, here's a note from Heather Dinich. Multiple, at least a half a dozen sources, continue to tell me what the Pac-12 is doing, still trying to do, doesn't change the perception that they are building a G5 level league when it comes to the college football revenue distribution. Let's not forget, no matter how much you may like and love those conferences or the teams in them, there's one or two places. It's the Big Ten and the SEC who make the decisions on who's going to be a part of the revenue distribution. Yes, the ACC and Big 12 too, but they're not going to give up any of their money for a league that's just been kind of thrown together, with all due respect to who might end up being a part of either the Pac-12 or what is now the Mountain West Conference.
When it comes to giving out money, there's no emotions involved here. Like Greg Sankey is not going to go, you know what, we're making 10 times more than everybody, but we feel sorry for the Pac, so we're going to go give them like $20 million. That's not how that works. And I would just simply say this, and it could very well be trolling. Like I said a moment ago, the Pac's on the level of the Big 12 or whatever. Like, again, that's silly, and you need look no further than the fact that the two founding members of this Pac 2.0, the Big 12 didn't want them.
Yeah.
They wanted a bunch of their buddies last year, but they didn't want those two, despite having a full year and multiple opportunities to add them. They never chose to. And, maybe down the line, 10 years from now, that happens or something. But the founding structure of this league was turned away by the Big 12, by the ACC. So to say that when they went and added a bunch of teams from the Mountain West that they're suddenly like, you're drinking copium, and I understand it and not trying to knock it or anything. But I think just to say that you're either trolling or it's just, I don't know what it is because it's not reality. But I'm looking to the future for that conference as being a bright and positive one, and one where they can make some moves and make it really interesting. But I just think this idea of catching up or whatever is not realistic right now, much the way that the Big 12 is not going to catch up to the SEC in terms of payouts. Like, let's not be silly and pretend and pump hot air to people and act like that's realistically happening. It's not. So much in that same way, this league is not going to be on the level of those other four, and will therefore not have that playoff consideration or the money that follows that. And yeah, we don't even know what the money looks like right now. It wasn't enough to lure any of the American teams who all decided to stay together. So yeah, there's a lot still to be sorted out there, but I think it's been very interesting to see the Pac make these moves and try to play this chess game. And now with a lawsuit today, you've got basically a stare down between two conferences, and you wonder, depending on how that goes, if both of them even survive past this, in the case of the Mountain West, if they're not able to get their side of things here.
From Luis, love your show. Question, why didn't the Pac-12 leftovers do this last year when they could have kept Cal, Stanford, plus probably added SMU and any of Tulane, Memphis, and UTSA?
I don't think Cal and Stanford wanted to be in a conference with Oregon State and Washington State anymore.
And with all due respect, again, we always say this is just being reality. They didn't want to be a part of any kind of conference that had
They didn't want the Big 12.
Boise State or...
They didn't want 99% of the Big 12. They wanted Texas and Oklahoma, and if you got those, they wanted maybe an Oklahoma State or something, but they were very much in their academic clouds and better-than-you clouds, and there was only certain teams they felt were worthy, and that was a part of what created that tension with the Big 12 and Pac-12 that lasted for years and then bubbled up into what all happened last year. So
yep.
Read that question again.
The question was, why didn't the Pac-12 leftovers, that would be Oregon State, Washington State, do this last year when they could have kept Cal, Stanford, plus added the possibility of SMU, Tulane, Memphis, or UTSA?
Well, because at this point last year, this had already all happened. They got left, and they were the only two left standing because when everybody started to get their life rasped, Colorado, right, made the first move.
Yep, and then the other three on one Friday morning back in the summer.
The other three, four corners.
No, I think he's talking about after that.
Because they had already committed to the ACC. So they were already gone.
Paul, when did Cal Stanford make the decision to the ACC?
I mean, pretty much
right in that same time.
In the same time period.
Okay.
So you basically were left with Oregon State, Washington State, and this quote-unquote war chest, and you had that lawsuit going on as well, remember, to try and figure that out, which lasted into the fall, and I forget when that finally got settled in favor of the Cougs and the Beavers, but that also then happened, and so that was the big key, was like, do they win this lawsuit and get this war chest? And that's what they were all caught up in, was just trying to get the Pac assets and win that so that they could then use those to get into the Big 12 or the ACC, or use those to do what they're doing right now and use all that money to go and create a new league, basically. So they didn't have the option that you're suggesting because everybody kind of grabbed their life rafts, including Stanford and Cal, and that left those two just without a home, basically.
UW fan Jim, I will get roasted in here, and there's been a couple of others who have said this, but Washington State, Oregon State, Boise State would compete with everyone save maybe Utah in the Big 12. This is, once again, it's not about how teams might play wins and losses head to head. It's about what brings in the money, which it kind of drives me crazy that too. Like, who's pretty good, who should be a part of this. And they do still have their opportunities because go be pretty good, go 11-1 or 12-0, whatever you could possibly be. It's not about that. It's not about that. There are teams inside the Big 12 who could beat teams in the Big 10, who could beat teams in the SEC, but they're not a part of those conferences for a reason. And we have respect for everybody who's floating out there or is on a life raft, but that's not how this works.
It is not about current performance on the field. If it was about current performance on the field, then
Boise would have been in the pack like 10 years ago or something, yeah.
Texas would not have been offered by the SEC when they were. They were just coming off one of the worst decades in their history, right?
That's probably a bad example because they're like the king money, but yeah, I know what you mean.
But like, I'm saying performance on the field.
Yeah,
So it's exactly the example because the money of it is what makes it, you ignore all the rest of it. So if it's performance on the field, then you would have had 10 teams before Texas just because you're like, well, the last decade, Texas
you're talking about wins and losses.
Yeah. When it's performance on the field
not what it's
recently, it's not. It's not at all. So Texas couldn't have just called it the SEC and been like, hey, we got a bunch of money, we got to come. And like, look, we like the money, but we're about quality here. And you guys have sucked for 10 years. And we don't have faith that you're going to be good again. Now, that turned out not to be true in any regard. They're the number one team in the country, 1 year into the conference already, and they were set up to go. But it's not about that. It's about television markets. It's about who hate watches you. It's about who, like, you get eyeballs no matter if people love you or hate you. It's about that. That's what it's about. And
like somebody who brought up Rice in Texas State, because they wanted the state of Texas. That's not – Rice has 5,000 people who go to their games. It's about eyeballs.
Yeah.
Let's remember why all this started. It's about money, who can generate more TV revenue, and that's exactly what it's about. There's no we'll take you two just because you were 10-2 last year.
And look, Stanford and Cal, if not for FSU and Clemson being mad and everybody knowing that they were mad – last year too, like if everything was copacetic in the ACC, they would have had no real motivation to add them either because they weren't worried about losing teams and falling below their threshold for their ESPN contract. So yeah, things all kind of worked out for Cal and Stanford that they got to be in a Power 4 conference, and they had the good grace of Notre Dame to say, hey, you guys should take them. And the ACC, even though they're not a full member in football, said, okay, Notre Dame, we'll take them.
By the way, one note to close it out, and we'll get back into this too. We're not done with it, but we do have Brett McMurphy who could else kind of tie a bow on this, at least for where it is now. So Texas goes into the SEC, right? Were they ever 38.5-point favorites against anybody in the last 10 years in the Big 12?
I don't feel like I ever watched lines all that closely, but now it's like everybody
38.5-point favorites against Mississippi State, and I get it. But that's amazing.
No, for a conference game, that's ridiculous, and it totally blows up the whole.
And Paxton gave me that note.
Part of it is that Texas is really, really good, and some may believe, perhaps rightfully, we'll see. It's the first month of the season, but they look really good, and some believe that they may be the best team in the entire country. They certainly appear to look in that conversation. They look like they deserve to be in that conversation, having performed the way that they have with two different quarterbacks now. But I think that also speaks to not only how good they are, but where Mississippi State is. But even then, 38.5-point favorite in the SEC is like, spare me the whole, it means more. Like, I know that's not what it means, but like, spare me the whole, like, everybody's a juggernaut and everybody's a murderer's row, except for Vanderbilt. It's like, no, except for Vanderbilt, except for Mississippi State, except for, because
sometimes it's South Carolina or whoever.
Right but
now it could be
absurd.
Auburn.
That's absurd.
It's different than that, but they all have been protected because they were part of pretty much the original when all the conference was put together. And there have been teams in the Big Ten who they could have left behind. There are teams in the Big 12 that, in fact, when it was the Southwest Conference, they were left behind. Some of them came back, like Houston, TCU, to be back a part of the conference.
I mean, that seems to me like it would have been peak Alabama against Vandy at its lowest, like would have been a 38.5 point spread. But to see that for Texas, Mississippi State is like, geez, Louise, that's pretty insane. Now, granted, Mississippi State just lost Blake Shapen, so.
Yeah, no, but 40 points?
No, I know.
They probably threw 10 points on it, though. I'm
going to go back and look at the other odds of games that are coming up this week, and not many are ever really above 10, 14, 17 points, but we'll do that. Thanks to Paxton for showing me that.